Okay, in this video session we go through setting up a Raspberry Pi from start to finish, starting with how to image an SD card, which is essentially your Raspberry Pi hard drive, and we'll connect it up to start computing. I'll emphasize that up front this is not a microprocessor or an Arduino or a daughter or a sister board, rather a motherboard with universal connectors making a full-up computer. Even though it appears bare bones and can fit in your pocket, not that I would carry it there, this is a full-up computer, the Raspberry Pi. Although there are numerous videos and guidance on the internet, we decided to break this down into a few steps in an outline that's available in the description. Looks a little bit involved, but if you go through the steps, you should be up and running in no time. There are two very critical items we'll emphasize that anyone using these should know that could destroy the Raspberry Pi or requiring you to re-image the SD card. But we'll go through those steps just in case you ever have to do that. The kit that we got from Make, I'll show you here in a second, came with a very informative book that you can read in no time. Helps fill in some of those gaps that internet videos like this don't always cover. It's very comprehensive, walks you through the steps and the anatomy of the board. The particular kit that we got, but we don't really endorse it. It's a good one, probably more than most folks need. It's called Make Raspberry Pi Starter Kit. It shows it for $119 here. I think we got it for well, much less, like $60 or so. So even though the Raspberry Pi is advertised and well known as a $35 computer, even though this part is, you still need the SD card, the cables, which we'll go over shortly, which most of them you probably already have lying around. But it's well worth it to some to consider a kit. I think if I were to buy these in bulk for a classroom situation, I would probably get a kit. One that includes what you can see here, a Raspberry Pi SD card, where it's not that special. It meets the requirements, of course, but has the noob software loaded on it already. It actually is a mini SD inside that could work for Raspberry Pi 2 and 3, I believe, have mini SD cards. One example of where the book fills in useful details is the anatomy of the board, which I started to mention, where here you can see the central chip, which is similar to what you find in iPhone 3, Kindle 2. This processor right there is a 32-bit 700 megahertz system built on an ARM11 architecture with 512 megabytes of RAM. So all that said, depending on the learning objectives, if you do have an extra computer, which you probably do, but if you don't, you probably want to try going through the process of developing the operating system onto this, formatting the card, and coming up with the recovery and boot disk, just in case you were to ever mess something up in the root, which we'll talk about briefly. Lucas and I tried both. Another advantage of preparing the hard drive is that you get the latest updates. I believe we have version 1.8 now, compared to what might be preloaded, depending on the kit that you get. Plus, it's good again to know how to re-image the disk if something goes wrong if you're logged into root. So, what do you need? Raspberry Pi, of course. An SD card, as I've talked about, at least 4 gigabytes and class 4. HDMI or an RCA composite cable. Ethernet, if you're interested in connecting to the internet. Power supply, one that can provide at least 700 milliamps at 5 volts to a micro USB. Most phone chargers will do that, but some won't, and that can be a showstopper. So just look for that 700 milliamp or above. Most of them, I believe, are 1 amp. Keyboard and mouse, USB. Optional is a case. These come in some of the kits. You will find this handy. There's a 3D printed potential template available online. One kit that looks like it's very nice is this updated Pi 2 that I'll go to. This is just an example of a Pi 2, and this particular case here looks pretty nice, clear, but yet you see the parts. That's what we like about our case as well. Let's go back to, I believe we've gone over everything that you need. We're going to do the RCA composite video as well to show that that's a possibility for those that may not have an HDMI compatible TV, for example. So let's go over formatting the SD card. And again, these steps will be available to you, but let's just do it for now. To format, you'll need this SD formatter. This one or this particular one's for Mac, but if you got Windows, you'll need the Win32 disk imager. For those of you who've done this before, it's not that tricky, but it's not the formatting that we typically do by right-clicking or selecting format that comes with the computers. You need this from the SD card association, and I'll provide that website. There's guidance also on how to do this that's more complete than what I'm giving here, but again, this is the to the point outline. So to download OS to an SD card, once you have this, so this is an example of the formatting, what's called SD formatter for Mac, and you go through a quick format and name your disk if you like. Just go ahead and put the SD card into your slot. Be careful, because on the SD card there's a write protection switch, and that's easily knocked to the protection by going in. So once you get to this point and you've formatted the disk in the proper way, you'll see that it's empty. But when you go to look at this on Finder, you should see two devices on here, which I don't see. Maybe I didn't put it in right. Let's see. Okay. To download the operating system onto an SD card after formatting is to download the Noobs zip from Raspberry Pi. You go to downloads on their website, pretty straightforward, and it's the Noobs, this one that you want to click. Then here you want the Noobs offline and network install, and I downloaded the zip, and so once that occurs, I'll show you what that file structure looks like here. And that is that particular one that's available that I got was Noobs 1.8, it looks like. And in here is what you'll see, that you'll go ahead and copy all of these files and put them onto the disk. After that, then the disk will look like so. It'll look like two disks, recovery and boot. Now when I eject these, I eject each one. I guess I can, it's a partitioned, I eject them all. Safely, you certainly safely want to remove that SD card. Then that is ready for loading into your Raspberry Pi. We have a breakout ribbon cable and breadboard here, but that's not anything that's required. This is just something that we play with for peripherals and external voltages. Where you have to be careful there is do not go over 3.3 volts if you're dealing with Arduino. That's 5 volts. Note I don't have resistors in these LEDs since we're dealing with lower voltages, but let's focus on what needs to be plugged in. The HDMI cable, which is going to this particular TV. This is pretty self-explanatory. The USB cables, the line goes down. They've inserted these just like in your computer. Okay, pardon my arm there, just connecting cables. I'm not going to hook in the internet at the moment since that's not needed. Here's the USB. Again, 5 volts, 700 milliamps. It's going to a standard phone charger that has the power.